so much for joining this conversation about the science of storytelling, science fiction, science literary writing, and we're going to be talking about our next gen science literary competition. Greetings, everyone. We are joined by Leticia Gomez, the savviest literary agent this side of the Milky Way. She's going to be breaking it all down because she knows that everyone has a story. Welcome, Leticia, also known as Letty. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kimberly, now that I'm here with you.
Great.
I'm
Thank you
doing
so much.
great. It's good to be here.
Thank you so much. And we're so happy to have you here in the ScienceQuest virtual studio. Welcome, welcome. Let's get this conversation going. Please introduce yourself and tell us, how did you get into the publishing industry?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. First of all, thank you for the warm introduction. My name is Leticia Gomez, but as you mentioned, a lot of people call me Letty. It's a much friendlier version of me. I am a book, film, and television agent who's based in Texas. I've been working in the publishing industry for about 2 decades. Loved every minute of it. I specialize in bringing culturally diverse voices to the forefront. And by that, I mean I like to represent authors, aspiring authors, who have a difficult time finding representation, or if they find representation, they're misrepresented. And I like to represent different literary projects across all genres, both nonfiction and fiction. And in fiction, I'm really, these days I'm really interested in sci-fi and fantasy. So I first became involved in the publishing industry back in the early 90s. I was living in a small town in New Mexico called Clovis. And Clovis it has a population about 40,000, and 60% of that population were Hispanics. And so one day, my best friend and I realized that there was not really any news media outlets that were serving that community. And so we kind of just made a spur of the moment decision to launch and publish our own bilingual newspaper. And that was kind of very innovative for the time, because that was the time before the emergence of the internet and social media as we know it today. And so that's how I got started, in publishing as a newspaper publisher. And then I got married, relocated to Texas, and I continued by doing some magazine freelance writing work. And then my husband and I at the time decided we want to start a family. And so when I got pregnant with my son, Zach, I decided that I just didn't want to just get round for 9 months. I wanted to do something else. So I decided to write a novel, a romance novel. And so luckily I was able to finish it before my water broke.
Lucky for everybody involved.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So yeah, I figured, well, I'll produce both a novel and a human being. God help.
Dual track productions.
Right, right. So after I delivered, then I said, okay, now the novel's finished. Now I have to see if I can get it published. And so I kind of started looking into what it would take to get it published. And for me, luckily, sometimes you just are at the right place at the right time. And at that time, a well-known publisher in New York named Kensington Publishing had announced that they were launching a new line of romances for Latinas. And so I submitted my novel, and the acquisition editor happened to like it and offered me a publishing contract. And so that was the first taste that I had of actually getting a book deal. And in this case, it was for myself, and what it would be like to be a literary agent. And so I just, so that I really enjoyed that experience. And so then I, decided, I got pregnant again, and with 2 small kids, it wasn't going to be easy I felt like it wasn't going to be easy to continue my publishing career, but I decided that I would become a literary agent because it would afford me the opportunity to raise my kids. And so that's how I started out in the business, Kimberly. And here I am.
Wow. And here you are. You were doing remote work before we were all doing remote work, right?
I was a pioneer in remote work.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. Super excited to have you on because we've been, talking about science fiction and, researching the topic for weeks in preparation for this interview. And I'm just super excited to, hear what you have to offer writers, aspiring writers, as far as tips and advice and break it down. What makes a great science fiction story? But I first want to look at, what is science fiction? A lot of people hear the term. They may not exactly know what that is, but we're talking about, literary writing related to science and technology. But there's also subgenres of sci-fi, including fantasy, futuristic, dystopian, and paranormal. I know we have some paranormal fans out there as well as general science fiction, sci-fi fans. So, any more you want to add on to, what is science fiction?
Yeah, well, most of us know it as sci-fi. It's shortened for science fiction, but you're right. It is speculative fiction, which typically deals with imaginative and futuristic concepts, such as advanced science and technology, space exploration, time travel, parallel universals, and extraterrestrial life. So you throw all of these possible scenarios together, and you kind of get, a good definition of what the science fiction is.
Mm-hmm. Great. Many of us watching, I know who will be watching, we grew up reading and watching pieces from the golden age of sci-fi, the 40s, 50s, 60s, and then into the new wave, Ray Bradbury and Asimov. I know there's some Foundation fans out there. But what is the state of affairs as far as science fiction writing currently?
Well, Kimberly, believe it or not, it is still one of the most popular fiction genres today. Um, did you know, Kimberly, that about 4,000 new science fiction titles are published on Amazon alone just every month?
Wow.
Yeah, that
Wow.
just that just goes to show that there's such an intense demand for new science fiction novels. But the good thing about that, though, Kimberly, is that the market isn't nearly as saturated uh, as some other genres like romance, suspense thrillers are in the traditional book publishing arena. Right? So there's a lot of room for new up and coming science fiction writers to make a mark and get a publishing deal. Also, science fiction is also in really high demand in the film and television industry as well. So, things are looking very good for this genre. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. And as you mentioned, there's so many new titles coming out, and I'm sure that agents like yourself are probably inundated with manuscripts. And I just wanted to ask you, with your years of looking at manuscripts, I'm sure you've gotten hundreds and thousands of them. What is it that grabs you? Like, what is it that makes you say, voila, this is it?
Well, that's a great question, Kimberly. But the first thing I'm going to say, though, about the book publishing industry is that it's very highly subjective. So, what one agent or editor thinks is a good sci-fi novel, another agent is going to think it's not so good. So there's going to be always a sea of opinions, and they're going to differ from one agent or one editor to another. So today I'm going to tell you what I think is a good definition of a good sci-fi story. And for me, that's high quality writing with beautiful imagery. Okay. Also, I really like unforgettable characters that you can really care about and root for. Personally, I don't care for characters who just seem to be too perfect, right? I like my characters to have flaws, for them to have idiosyncrasies, for them to have strange quirks, and especially in science fiction, right? You have always have extraterrestrials with really strange quirks, and that's what makes it a lot of fun to watch or a lot of fun to read. So that's what I like. I like vulnerable human beings and extraterrestrials, right, who overcome adversity, and then they go on to become heroes. So, and I also appreciate settings that just make me forget about where I am.
Mm-hmm.
Just transport me to another world, another time, another space.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think with all of the problems that we're having today and all of the gloom and doom that we've had so far in this decade, a lot of people are looking for escapism, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And escapism that is not an addiction. That's not, it's entertainment is a better escapism than alcohol or drugs, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I like for stories to take me out of where I am. And I also like for them to have a very good balance between the narrative and the dialogue. I don't like to read anything that's all narrative or anything that's all dialogue. It's about finding that really great balance between the two. Um, Also, I love fun and witty dialogue between the characters. I always also love hilarious one-liners, and a lot of people are under the misconception that science fiction has to be always serious, but you can interject humor in science fiction, I think. And then also, I just love suspenseful cliffhangers, whether it's at the end of a scene or at the end of the chapter. So these are the kind of things that float my boat when it comes to reading science fiction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that whole idea of you know transporting the reader to different worlds, and also compelling graphics or eye-catching graphics. And we've been talking about that too over the course of this time period in preparation for this. You mentioned the idea of creating a world, and it could be a planetary system, a futuristic 80s style retro situation, or it could be an enchanted forest where mystery is behind every tree, or it might be that lost island. Yeah, can you just speak a little bit more about the importance of creating that world?
Yeah, world building is one of the most important elements of science fiction writing, and it's the process of constructing an imaginary world, you know, and world building is part of that writing process that sets up where your story is going to take place. So when you build a world in science fiction writing, you want to, one of the things you want to do is you want to think about the landscape, you know, that your characters are going to live on or inhabit. That's going to really set the tone for your story. Also, what are you got to then once you establish the world, then you start building the elements around the world, right? So you want to think about, well, what kind of occupations are there going to be um, in this new world, and what kind of preoccupations are there going to be? What are going to be the problems that people living in this world are going to face? Um, and so I'll give you a couple of examples of what I feel is really good world building. First, I'll give you a couple of movie examples, and then I'll give you a couple of science fiction novel examples. So for me, I am a huge fan of the Game of Thrones because of the world building. I think if the world building wasn't so good, I wouldn't have taken an interest in the Game of Thrones. But I just thought that the Game of Thrones, the world building was just so interesting. The author created worlds where people wanted to spend time in every week, right? Every episode. So I think that's one example of really good world building. Another example is an old classic sci-fi movie with one of my favorite actors. Harrison Ford was the Blade Runner. So this movie is like, I think it might even be 3 decades old now, but the world that was built was it was visionary for the time, and so and what I really enjoyed about that movie is that not only was the world building great, but the main character, which was Harrison Ford, he narrated, about the world he lived in, while at the same time that the reader was viewing the world. So I just thought that was very captivating for me. In novels, I think one of the most excellent examples is Hogwarts, right, in England, in the Harry Potter series.
Mm-hmm.
That really hooked a lot of people. And then also J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth in his Lord of the Rings series. So those, I think, are some good examples of world building. And so you and I, Kimberly, in weeks past had talked about, well, what are some of the key fundamental elements of world building? And so I'd like just to kind of share those with our viewers today. And first of all is location, the location of your world. Where is your world going to be? Is it going to be up in the starry heavens, in a different galaxy? Is it going to be on the Earth, but centuries into the future? Is it going to be underneath the Earth's core? Well, that's for you, the aspiring sci-fi author, to decide. Right? So you want to think of a location of your world, and then you want to kind of decide what the culture of that world is going to be. Is it going to be filled with people who do not need food and water to sustain themselves? Is it going to be peaceful people? Are they going to be people who like to wage war? What is the culture going to be? Are people going to be still married? Is it all just going to be male empires, female empires? You decide what kind of culture you want to your world to be. Also, the history of the world that you created, right? Was this world always just there, or did something explode and create the world? Uh, how tell the history of the world that you've built, and then add some magical elements into your world. It's up to you. I mean, is the dust particles on the earth, magical in some way, or science fiction always has a supernatural, right, element to it. So magic can also be, defined as supernatural. What are the supernatural things that go on in your world? And then, of course, there's the technology, right? What kind of technology is going to be in this world? I've always been a Star Trek fan, as you can see. And one of the reasons I really liked Star Trek was because even though Gene Roddenberry created it, I'm thinking it's almost the 50-year mark, is the technology, right? I remember as a little girl watching the episodes. I remember the little portable box, handheld devices that they used to have in their hands. I remember Captain Kirk, right, being on a planet, exploring it, and then he has a watch-like apparatus, and he's reporting his findings. Well, I mean, isn't that the Apple Watch today?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right? And who can forget Beam Me, that little box where he said, "Beam me up, Scotty,"
mm-hmm,
little portable devices. So,
mm-hmm.
that's a good example of technology. And a good sci-fi writer has to have that visionary way of thinking about technology. I mean, we've come so far in technology, so you have to think, okay, what's next?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not an easy thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the elements: location, culture, history, magical or supernatural elements, and then the technology. You put all those things together, and you're going to get yourself a riveting sci-fi novel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you just went through, I think, and we've talked about this, lends to the difficulty in being a good writer in this genre. I mean, you have to know a lot, you have to do a lot of research, you have to, be interested in scientific topics. And, the writing process, as we've discussed, is, often a solo project where people are, by themselves writing. So I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit more about, the difficulties that a writer might face in this genre.
Yeah, you're right. There are going to be several obstacles that's going to prevent an aspiring sci-fi writer to break into traditional book publishing. And I think that one of the greatest challenges in this genre is that today's readers, oh my goodness, they have a short attention span. They want instant gratification, and you have to hook them coming right out of the gate with your story. I mean, you have to pique their interest starting with the first chapter, the first page, the first paragraph, even with the first sentence. And they sometimes can be unforgiving if an author doesn't deliver instant gratification. So that's what makes it tough is the readership, the target audience, because usually it's the kind of people who are drawn to sci-fi are really creative visual people, right? And so they want the things that they read, the novels that they read, to instantly create strong visuals for them in their mind. And if a sci-fi writer can't do that, they're not going to invest the time in it. Another thing that makes it very difficult, I think, is the lack of workshops and classes that teach the fundamentals of sci-fi writing. You
Mm-hmm.
know, you
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of, workshops for romance novels. You see a lot of workshops for, nonfiction writing. But I think there needs to be more workshops and classes that study, you know, the fundamentals of sci-fi.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, I think that another thing is that it would be great if you had established and already published sci-fi writers who are willing to mentor young aspiring sci-fi writers. That also would, I think, would help to overcome some of these obstacles. And then, probably the greatest obstacle challenge that an aspiring sci-fi writer will face is that if they don't have representation from a reputable literary agent, chances are that that their work is never going to be seen by an acquisition editor at a publishing house, because all publishers today, most of them do not take unagented submissions. You have to have an agent to submit your work for you. And so that stops a lot of sci-fi writers in their tracks, because it's very difficult to find literary agent representation today. It's very can be a very long and frustrating process, because quite frankly, Kimberly, many of us agents do not make ourselves accessible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And
So those
that's
are something.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why, we're so appreciative that you are a part of our process here of Science Quest. Our goals are obviously to educate and inform people about science related topics, but also to encourage writers and, creatives in this field. Like you say, we all want to be able to grab that latest science fiction book or watch that new TV show and fall into someone else's vision or world about the future. The world that they're creating for us all. So, what tips could you or would you offer up for writers out there that have the inclination or the proclivity to write in this
Mhm.
genre?
Okay. Well, first of all, they need to read a lot of science fiction. You always have to read the genre that you are wanting to write in. So first, I would encourage them to read as much science fiction as their eyes can possibly handle, and I think they should read the pioneers of science fiction, like Gene Roddenberry, like Jack Williamson, which was even before Roddenberry, Carl Sagan. Read the pioneers of science fiction. Read the present, prevalent sci-fi writers as well. Uh, and then read, unknowns, so far. And so you just really need to study the genre that you want to write in, is the first thing. Once you've read your eyes out, can't take any more, then look for ways to educate yourself about the fundamentals of sci-fi writing. So if you actually happen to come across a workshop or a class that is about sci-fi writing, or one of the subgenres that Kimberly, showed us earlier on, like fantasy, paranormal, futuristic, dystopian, by all means enroll in that class. Okay. Um, if you happen to know of an established sci-fi writer, you might want to, try to pick their brain about how, what their writing process is like. Do they write in the morning? Do they write in the evening? What is their favorite go-to places for research? And so those are, I think, some of the things that I would encourage aspiring sci-fi writers to do is to seek out, because it's not going to come to you, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in the course of these conversations, you've also mentioned the importance of having like a notebook and a pen and pencil available, or some way to take notes on your devices. And I was wondering if you could just speak more about why that's important to have those kinds of tools readily available.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Because you never know when your creative juices are going to strike. I've always felt that a writer from the heart, a true writer, right, is always thinking of storylines and plots in their head, characters. Really, if you think about it, these, you kind of could be misidentified as a crazy person. So you never know when your creative juices are going to strike. So I always encourage you to take a notepad with you, or something to write with, or, if you want to do your edit notes on your phone. But just, be observant. Sometimes you can get a really great idea in the everyday, simple, normal things of life. So that's why you should always be open to looking at ordinary things from an extraordinary point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, it's like an aha moment. And if you don't capture it, what happens? You forget.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're living in an information overload society, right? And so if you don't seize the moment, it's going to pass you by, because you're going to get thrown so much other information. So that's the importance of carrying, a pad, a pencil, a journal. Buy yourself a nice journal at Barnes and Noble, and just carry that with you, because you just never know when you're going to get that idea. Not only just ideas about world building, but also you might see a strange character at Denny's, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that guy would make a really great sci-fi character. You write down the description, what their mannerisms were, what about them that you felt, made them strange or unique or bizarre. And so, yeah, you just want to, capture, in writing what you're seeing a lot of times. So that's the importance of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, in my research, I came across a note about the well-known writer Octavia Butler. She had a notebook. She had notebooks that she started writing in when she was a young child, and she, saved them, and they have them now archived. And I just thought, this young child with this notebook, and how, significant that is. And thank God she did that, because we have those materials now. But a lot of people don't really think about it. And you're right. You could be out there, at the store, and something grabs your eye and you don't write it down. By the time you get home, you've forgotten it, because your dog needs to be fed, or the kids need food or something. So,
and the thing is that young people today, they're not used to writing by hand anymore. So it's not an easy thing that we're asking them to do. It is it's going to require extra effort on their part
Mm-hmm.
because they're just used to thumbing, not writing. And so, but when writing it by hand, you're really transforming into a writer. That's the difference between a writer and just somebody who likes and just a technology person.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the act of they need to get into the practice of the art of writing.
Mm-hmm.
And
You
when
know,
you have a notebook and a pencil or a pen, you're actually being a writer. That
mm-hmm.
makes any sense.
Oh, totally. And that, it's a great segue into talking about, the writing process. And here we're going to just look at, the steps for better writing,
Mm-hmm.
what that looks like. And, the writing process, like you said, is a series of steps that we can take for creative writing in general.
Mm-hmm. And we said that one of those first steps was to read the genre that you're wanting to write. And then, a lot of people, some people will conjure up the world first and then the main characters, and some other authors do it the opposite way. They'll think of, they'll have this character that's been in their head for years, and they conjure up or they imagine the character first, and then they create the world, to put that character in. So it doesn't, there's no right or wrong here. It's what came up first in your mind, either the
Mm-hmm.
world or the character. So when you have one, then that's the foundation that you need. And then you build from there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you can take that, brainstorming process, turn those ideas into a draft, and, you just put it out there and don't worry about it all being perfect and beautiful. That's what a draft is, and oftentimes you have to go through several drafts and revise, take that and make changes, make improvements, and also show it to people as well and get feedback.
Yeah, Kimberly, I think the most important thing is if you got that story that's burning up inside you, you need to get it out. Just get it out on paper, get it out on your computer screen. Like you said, do not worry about it coming out perfect. Because even the greatest writers in the world, they all need editors.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is so good that they do not need an editor. So
Mm-hmm.
that process will come later. But if you've got the story, get it out of your system. Don't stop until you have your first draft done.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then you go through, your editing process, however long that takes. And then, after that, you're hopefully in a position where you can get something published and talk about that process a little bit.
Yeah, like I said, that can be one of the toughest um, aspects of it, but you don't have to. You can take it step by step, right? So, like for example, a perfect way to start is to take part and to participate in the Zoom Catcher's NextGen Sci-Fi Writing Contest, right?
Love it.
Because so yeah, the first step is obviously to write something, right, that somebody else can read, right? And if you want to start with maybe sometimes you could want to start out with a short story. And a short story can be anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 words. So start with a short story and then look up sci-fi, either literary or digital magazines that take sci-fi short stories and submit. So you can start out that way. You don't have to, go for the full-fledged novel right off the bat. You can work your way up to that. So like I said, just, everybody's ability is going to be different. Everybody's time is going to be different. So just do what you are inspired to write with the resources that you have, and then just take it step by step.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So just to go through it, a writing process, you're going to pre-write, generate ideas, brainstorm, get organized. And that can be the hardest part. Do your draft and then several drafts probably. Do some revisions, show it to people. Then you're going to be probably editing like crazy. But the first thing is, like you say, to get it out. And then you're in the position where you can get things published. Like you say, submit your work. Don't be afraid. Don't worry about what others may think. And always definitely remember to have fun. Great.
Great stuff.
And that is a perfect opportunity to keep talking about our NextGen ScienceQuest NextGen literary competition. You are going to be one of our judges. You're going to be getting those final customs. We're so super excited to have you a part of that process. We have it broken down into categories: young adults, 13 to 20, and then we have an adult category. And in those subgenres that we talked about: fantasy, futuristic, dystopian, and paranormal. Up to 15 pages, essay style, short story, or novel. Take it away. Anything else you want to add about that?
No, I just really looking forward to the submissions, and I'm hoping to get submissions from both boys and girls, men and women, because one of the things that up until now, the genre of science fiction has been dominated by men. And I'm really, in the future, I'm really hoping that that's going to change. I'm really hoping that we will get more female aspiring science fiction writers. And I think that we're well on our road to doing that, but I think it's still going to, we're still haven't gotten there yet. But one of the reasons I say that, Kimberly, is because a lot of great science fiction writers are really good in the STEM subjects. Growing up, or I have a daughter who really excels in math and science, and so I think girls nowadays, they are excelling in these STEM subjects, and that makes them really great prospects to become sci-fi writers.
Great. You heard it right here, folks. NextGen Science Fiction Literary Writing Competition. Submissions are open. Look for the description link, or look for the link in our description right here on our YouTube channel. We want you. We're looking for those gems. And you have a literary agent, the savviest one this side of the Milky Way, who will be able to say, that's it. So we strongly encourage all you sci-fi buffs, pick up your.
And the winner's going to get a consultation session with me.
That's right.
Some mentoring, and I hope to find the next great sci-fi writer that I can represent.
You heard that right here. We're looking for you. Cash prizes, consultation with Savvy Literary. Super, super excited to see your submissions. I can't wait to see what worlds that you want to take us to. So we're going to get to the end of this conversation, start to wrap things up. Any final thoughts, any words of wisdom for these sci-fi writers out there?
Yeah, just have, like you said, just have fun with it. No idea is too dumb. No idea. I mean, just if it comes from your imagination and from your heart, it's a great idea. You just, the execution at first may not be perfect, but everything takes time. I mean, even a diamond, when it's pulled out of the earth, it still has to be taken care of. It still has to be polished off. It still has to be refined. So, like I said, don't strive for perfection. Just strive for words on the page. And it's like I said, it's the more you write, the better you'll become at it. So yeah, that's my advice.
Great. And then my final thought is, as you once said to me, it takes a village to raise a science fiction writer. So parents, family, friends, if you notice you have some young people in your life that love to write, encourage them. Buy them more notebooks, get them some good books, help them along, look at what they're reading, give them, positive feedback, and that'll go a long, long way. Thank you so much, Savvy Literary Agent Letty Gomez for being here. Looking forward to seeing you because we know you'll be back to announce the winner of the competition. Is that right?
I look forward to that. I really do.
Great, great. Well, we hope you have a great rest of your week. And that is a wrap, folks. Thank you so much for joining our conversation with Leticia Gomez, talking about the science of storytelling. Sci-fi writers, we want you. ScienceQuest is now accepting submissions for our NextGen Science Literary Writing Competition. We have 2 categories, young adult, ages 13 to 20, and adult 21 and over. We are accepting science fiction, fantasy, futuristic, dystopian, and paranormal essays, novels, and short stories. We have cash prizes, a chance to appear in our ScienceQuest podcast, and a consultation with a literary agent. For more information, go to www.zoomcatchers.us or check us out on our Zoomcatchers and ScienceQuest YouTube channel.